Unemployed and poor woman fixed her makeup using a car window. But the millionaire inside saw everything, and Diane Miller had been out of work for 6 months and felt the weight of each passing day without finding an opportunity. At 52, she faced the harsh reality of a job market that seemed to have no place for women her age, no matter how qualified she was. That Tuesday morning, she was fixing her makeup using the dark window of a luxury car parked on the street as a mirror. She needed to look impeccable for yet another job interview. As she applied the cheap red lipstick she had bought from a street vendor, she had no idea that inside the vehicle, Richard Thompson, one of the most influential businessmen in New York City, was watching her every move. The blonde woman checked once more to make sure her hair was in place and smoothed her beige blouse, which she had washed and ironed the night before. It was the only piece of clothing she still considered presentable for an interview. The heel of her shoe was a bit loose, but she had managed to fix it with tape that was almost invisible. Richard was inside his black Cadillac waiting for an important call when he noticed the woman approaching the passenger window. At first he felt annoyed, thinking she might be trying to look inside the vehicle. But when he saw that she was only using the reflection to fix her appearance, something touched his heart deeply. Her delicate movement of applying lipstick reminded him of his own mother, Mrs. Elizabeth, whom he had lost when he was just 15. She also had the habit of fixing her makeup in the most unlikely mirrors when she couldn't even afford a small compact mirror. Richard found himself transported back to his poor childhood in rural Kentucky before he built his business empire. Diane finished fixing her makeup and took a few steps back, taking one last look at her reflection. That's when she realized there was someone inside the car. Her eyes met Richard's through the glass. She froze in shame, feeling her face burn with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't see anyone was in there," she said, quickly stepping away from the vehicle. Richard opened the window and leaned out. "No need to apologize. You didn't do anything wrong," he replied in a kind voice. Diane was visibly nervous, fidgeting with the strap of the old purse she carried. "It's just that I have an interview soon and couldn't find any mirror along the way. I live far away and came by bus. It took me almost 2 hours to get here." "Job interview?" asked Richard, genuinely interested. "Yes, sir. For a secretary position at an accounting firm here in the area. I've been unemployed for several months, and this opportunity is very important to me." Richard noticed she spoke politely and clearly, showing she had a good education. He also observed that despite her simple clothes, she appeared clean and well put together. "Well, I hope everything works out for you. Good luck with the interview." "Thank you very much for your understanding, sir. Have a good day." Diane said goodbye and began walking toward the office building where the interview would take place. Richard watched her walk away, noticing she limped slightly, probably because of her damaged shoe. Something about that encounter had touched him deeply, and he couldn't get the image of that woman out of his head. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. 2 hours later, Richard was still in the same spot when he saw Diane exit the building. She walked slowly with slumped shoulders and a dejected expression. It was clear the interview hadn't gone well. She stopped on the sidewalk, took a tissue from her purse, and discreetly wiped her eyes. Richard felt a pang in his chest seeing her cry. Without thinking twice, he got out of the car and approached her. "Excuse me, are you all right, ma'am?" Diane was startled to see him. She quickly tried to hide that she had been crying. "Oh, you're still here? Yes, I'm fine, thank you." "Forgive my intrusion, but I noticed you left the building looking upset. Did the interview not go well?" Diane took a deep breath before answering. There was something in that man's voice that conveyed sincerity. "To tell you the truth, it wasn't even a real interview. When they found out my age, they said I didn't fit the profile they were looking for. They didn't even let me properly show my resume." "How old are you, if you don't mind my asking?" 52. I worked for 25 years at the same company as an executive secretary, but when the company was sold, the new owner fired all the older employees. Since then, it's been very hard to find a new job." Richard shook his head, indignant at the situation. "That's an injustice. Experience should be valued, not thrown away." That's what I think too, but unfortunately that's not how the job market works. Well, I need to get going. I have to take 2 buses to get back home, and I still have to stop by the supermarket to see if I can find anything on sale for dinner. Do you live far from here? In Flatbush? It's far, but it's where I can afford the rent with the little money I have saved. My ex-husband left me with a lot of debt when he left, and I'm still paying it off. Richard was moved by that woman's story. There was something about Diane that reminded him not only of his own mother, but of all the hard-working women he had met throughout his life who faced similar struggles. Listen, I don't usually do this, but I'd like to help. I'm a businessman and I have contacts at several companies. Maybe I can refer you for some openings. Diane looked at him with suspicion. She was used to empty promises and didn't want to get her hopes up again. You're very kind, but you don't need to trouble yourself. I'll find something eventually. It's no trouble. In fact, I have my own company, and we need someone for the administrative department. Would you at least be willing to come see the place? I don't know what to say. You don't even really know me. Sometimes the best opportunities come at the most unexpected times. How about you stop by tomorrow morning? I can text you the address. Diane hesitated for a few seconds. There was something sincere about that man, but she also didn't want to seem desperate. All right, I'll come take a look, but I want to be clear that I don't want any favors. Hey, if I'm hired, I want it to be because I deserve the position. I wouldn't expect any less from an experienced professional like you. Richard wrote down Diane's phone number and handed her his business card. When she read, Richard Thompson, CEO, Thompson Enterprise Group, her eyes widened. You're the owner of Thompson Enterprise? I've seen that company in the papers. It's one of the biggest in the country. That's true. And precisely for that reason, I know the value of dedicated and experienced people. See you tomorrow, Mrs. Diane. She stood still on the sidewalk, looking at the business card as Richard got into his car and drove away. She couldn't believe what had just happened. Was her luck finally changing? That night Diane could barely sleep. She kept imagining what it would be like to work for such a large and important company. At the same time, she was afraid it was all just a dream, and that the next morning she would find out it was nothing but an illusion. She woke up at 5 in the morning and began getting ready with great care. She washed her hair, put on her best outfit, and did simple makeup. She left home 2 hours before the scheduled time to avoid any risk of being late. The Thompson Enterprise Group building was imposing, with over 20 floors of mirrored glass in the city center. Diane felt intimidated entering the lobby with its marble floors and modern decor. She had never worked in such an elegant place. The receptionist, a young woman no older than 25, looked Diane up and down with an air of superiority. Do you have an appointment? Yes. I have a meeting with Mr. Richard Thompson at 9 o'clock. My name is Diane Miller. The receptionist checked the schedule with a skeptical look. It is indeed here, but are you sure it's with the CEO? Wouldn't it be with someone from HR? He himself scheduled it with me personally yesterday. All right, go up to the 20th floor. His secretary will receive you. In the elevator, Diane tried to control her nervousness. Her hands were sweating, and she felt her heart racing. When the doors opened on the top floor, she saw an even more luxurious reception area, with fine wood furniture and expensive paintings on the walls. Richard's secretary, a woman around 60 years old, greeted her with a warm smile. You must be Mrs. Diane. Mr. Richard has already told me about you. You may go in. He's waiting. Richard's office was larger than the entire house where Diane lived. Huge windows offered a panoramic view of the city. Richard rose from his desk and came to greet her. Good morning, Mrs. Diane. How was your trip here? Good morning, Mr. Richard. It was smooth, thank you. What a beautiful view of the city. Please have a seat. Make yourself comfortable. Would you like some coffee or water? Coffee would be very nice, thank you. Richard poured coffee into fine porcelain cups and sat in an armchair facing Diane, creating a more informal atmosphere for the conversation. Well, first I'd like to learn a bit more about your professional experience. Did you bring a resume? Diane took a folder with her organized documents from her bag. She had printed everything at a print shop because her printer had broken months ago and she didn't have the money to fix it. Here is my resume and some recommendation letters from my former bosses. Richard examined the documents carefully. He was impressed with Diane's experience. She had worked at reputable companies and had excellent references. I see here that you worked at Wilson & Partners Construction for 15 years. I know that company well. And then at Jenkins Import Company for 10 years. They are serious businesses. Yes, I always sought to work in places where I could grow professionally and truly contribute. And why did you leave Jenkins Import Company? Diane sighed before answering. She knew that question would come and had already decided to be completely honest. The company was sold to an international group. The new owner decided to bring his own team and fired almost all the Brazilian employees over 40. They said it was a restructuring to modernize processes. I understand. Unfortunately, that has become common in the market. And since then, you've been unemployed? For 6 months. I've been looking for work every day, but I always run into the age issue. Often, they don't even look at my experience. Richard shook his head in disapproval. That's a waste of talent. Experience isn't something you buy. It's built over the years. That's exactly what I think, Mr. Richard. Well, let me explain the position we have available. We need someone to coordinate the corporate client relations department. It's a role that requires experience, maturity, and the ability to handle complex situations. The starting salary is 8,000 Rs, plus benefits. Diane almost choked on her coffee. She hadn't earned such a high salary in years. $8,000, Mr. Richard, that's much more than I expected. It's the fair value for the position. Of course, there would be a 3-month probation period for both sides to get to know each other better. I accept, Mr. Richard. When can I start? Let's take it slow. First, I want you to see the department and talk with some team members. How about we talk again next week? Diane agreed, though she was anxious to start working immediately. She urgently needed the income to get her bills in order. Leaving the building, Diane still couldn't believe what had happened. It seemed too good to be true. She decided not to tell anyone until she was sure she would actually be hired. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. During the following week, Diane could hardly do anything besides think about the job opportunity. She researched the company online, studied up on the corporate relationship market, and even bought some more appropriate clothing for the corporate environment, spending almost all the money she had saved. On the scheduled Monday for the follow-up, she arrived at the building an hour before the agreed time. This time, the receptionist treated her more politely, probably on instructions from above. Richard greeted her accompanied by Margaret Wilson, the Human Resources Director, a woman around 55 years old with a stern appearance and formal manners. Mrs. Diane, this is Dr. Margaret, our HR Director. She will handle the hiring process. Margaret greeted Diane with a firm handshake, but her gaze conveyed a certain coldness. Pleasure, Mrs. Diane. Mr. Richard told me about you. Shall we talk in my office? In Margaret's office, the atmosphere was much more formal and intimidating. The director asked several technical questions about professional experience, testing Diane's knowledge of management software and administrative procedures. I see here that your last job was 6 months ago. What have you been doing during this period? I've been actively looking for work, Dr. Margaret. I also took the opportunity to take some free online courses to update my skills. And why did you decide to look for a job specifically at our company? Diane hesitated. She couldn't say that the CEO himself had invited her, as she didn't know if Richard had told the director the whole truth. I researched the company and was impressed by its reputation and values. I believe my experience can contribute to the organization's growth. I see. Well, I'll be frank with you. We have many younger candidates for this position, people with energy and willingness for long work hours. Are you sure you can keep up with the pace of a dynamic company like ours? The question took Diane by surprise. It was exactly the kind of prejudice she faced in every interview. Dr. Margaret, my age has brought me experience and maturity. I know how to solve problems that younger people might not even imagine could happen, and as for energy, I can assure you I'm more willing than many young people I've met. That may be, but we also have to think about team integration. Most of our employees are between 25 and 35 years old. Don't you think you might feel out of place? Diane began to realize that Margaret was clearly trying to discourage her from taking the job. Something wasn't right about this situation. "I've always gotten along well with people of all ages, Doctor. In fact, I believe age diversity enriches any work environment." "Well, I'll have to speak with Mr. Richard about your application. We'll be in touch next week." Diane left the meeting with a bad feeling. It was clear that the HR director didn't want to hire her, regardless of her qualifications. She began to wonder if Richard actually had decision-making power over hiring, or if he was just making promises he couldn't keep. 3 days later, Diane received a call from Richard's secretary, asking her to come back to the company. When she arrived, he received her alone in his office with a serious expression. "Mrs. Diane, I spoke with Dr. Margaret about our conversation. She told me you seemed unsure about accepting the position." Diane was outraged. It was obvious the director had lied about the meeting. "Mr. Richard, with all due respect, that's not true. I showed great interest in the position. In fact, I had the impression it was Dr. Margaret who questioned whether I would be suitable for the role, mainly because of my age." Richard sighed and leaned back in his chair. "Unfortunately, this confirms something I already suspected. Dr. Margaret has some biases I need to address with her. Mrs. Diane, are you still interested in the position?" "Of course, Mr. Richard. It's exactly the type of work I've always wanted to do." "Then it's settled. You start next Monday. I will personally oversee your integration into the company." "But what about Dr. Margaret? Won't she be upset?" "Leave that to me. I am the CEO of this company, and the final hiring decisions go through me." Diane left Richard's office beaming. She had finally gotten a job after months of searching. She couldn't wait to start and show what she was capable of. On her first day of work, Diane arrived at the company at 7:30 in the morning, an hour before the official start time. She wanted to make a good first impression and get to know the environment better before everyone arrived. Richard was already in his office and came down to greet her personally. "Good morning, Mrs. Diane. How are you feeling on your first day?" "Anxious and motivated, Mr. Richard. I could barely sleep from all the anticipation." "That's the attitude I like to see. I'll introduce you to your department's team." The Corporate Relations Department was on the 15th floor and had a team of 8 people. When Richard entered accompanied by Diane, everyone stopped what they were doing. "Everyone, I'd like to introduce our new coordinator, Mrs. Diane Miller. She has over 20 years of experience in administration and will help us improve our processes." The team's reaction was mixed. Some greeted Diane politely, but she noticed looks of surprise and even disapproval on some faces. After Richard left, Diane was shown to her office, a smaller but well-equipped room with a view of the city. She organized her personal materials and began studying the department's current processes. During lunch, she went to the company cafeteria. There were several tables with groups of employees talking animatedly. Diane picked up her tray and looked for a place to sit. "Excuse me, may I sit here?" she asked a group of 4 young people. "Oh, sure," replied one of the girls. But Diane noticed the conversation quieted down when she approached. "I'm Diane, the new coordinator for the corporate department." "We know," said a young man of about 28. "I'm Brian, the senior analyst. These are Jessica, Amanda, and Kevin. Pleased to meet you. I hope we can work well together." "Yeah, we hope so too," replied Jessica, but her tone wasn't very convincing. Diane noticed the conversation didn't flow naturally. The young people seemed uncomfortable with her presence, and soon each one made an excuse to get back to work. On the afternoon of the first day, Diane was analyzing reports when there was a knock on her office door. "Come in." It was Brian, the analyst she had met at lunch. "Mrs. Diane, may I speak with you for a moment?" "Of course, Brian. Have a seat. What do you need?" "Well, I don't want to be rude, but the folks in the department are a bit confused about your hiring." "Confused how?" "It's just that we don't understand how you got the position. There was no selection process, no internal posting for promotions. All of a sudden, you just showed up as our new boss." Diane understood where he was going with this. They suspected she had gotten the job through some kind of scheme. "Brian, I understand your concern. You have the right to know that your new coordinator was hired fairly. I can assure you I went through interviews and evaluations like any other candidate. Interviews with whom? Because Dr. Margaret mentioned she wasn't involved in any selection process for this position, Diane realized she was in a delicate situation. If she mentioned she was hired directly by the CEO, it could raise even more suspicion. The interviews were conducted by the company's top management. I can't go into details about the process, but I can assure you it was completely legitimate. Okay. Well, I suppose things will become clearer with time. Brian left the room, but Diane had a feeling the problem was just beginning. It was obvious that her hiring had caused discomfort among the employees, and she would have to work twice as hard to prove her worth. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now, continuing. In the following weeks, Diane noticed she was being constantly tested by the team. Reports arrived late. Important information wasn't passed along, and sometimes she found out about important meetings she hadn't been informed of. Despite the difficulties, she stayed calm and tried to resolve issues without creating conflict. Her experience helped her quickly identify flaws in processes and suggest improvements, but her suggestions were met with resistance. A month after she was hired, Richard called her in for an evaluation meeting. "How are you feeling at the company, Mrs. Diane?" "Well, Mr. Richard, I'm learning about the processes and trying to contribute as best I can." "Great. I've been receiving some feedback about your work." Diane felt her stomach tighten. She knew some team members weren't cooperating, but she didn't want to seem like she was complaining about her colleagues. "I hope it's positive feedback." "Actually, it's mixed. Some people praised your dedication and knowledge, but others questioned your leadership ability." "May I ask what kind of questions?" "They said you seem unsure in some decisions and have difficulty asserting yourself with the younger team members." Diane knew that wasn't true. She was being careful not to step on anyone's toes, but she wasn't being insecure. "Mr. Richard, may I be honest with you?" "Of course, always." "I have the impression that part of the team is resisting my leadership, not because of technical issues, but because of prejudice. They don't seem to accept having a coordinator my age." Richard was silent for a few seconds, considering Diane's words. "Do you have any specific examples?" "Information that doesn't reach me. Reports that are turned in late for no apparent reason. Meetings from which I'm deliberately excluded. They're subtle things, but they make my job harder." "I understand." "Well, I'll speak individually with some team members to get a better sense of the situation. For now, keep focusing on your work. Results speak louder than any prejudice." Diane left the meeting with mixed feelings. On one hand, she felt relieved that Richard had shown willingness to investigate the situation. On the other, she worried her complaints might be interpreted as an inability to solve problems. 2 days later, she was in her office when she heard raised voices in the hallway. She recognized Brian's voice arguing with someone. "This is unfair, Dr. Margaret. I've worked at this company for 4 years and always had excellent reviews. It was obvious I would be the next coordinator. Brian, hiring decisions are made considering various factors. It's not just about time with the company." "Various factors like what?" "She came here out of nowhere. Nobody really knows how she got the position. And now the CEO is holding private meetings to investigate our team because of her." Diane closed her office door, feeling extremely uncomfortable. It was obvious Brian thought he deserved the coordinator position and that her hiring had frustrated his expectations. That afternoon, she decided to take action. She requested a meeting with the entire team to clarify the situation. "Everyone, I know my arrival here has raised some questions. I'd like to take this opportunity for us to talk openly about it." The team gathered in the conference room with serious expressions. "Brian, I know you were expecting to be promoted to coordinator. I want you to know I completely respect your dedication to the company and your knowledge." "Thank you," he replied curtly. "Actually, I'd like to propose we work in partnership. You know the current processes deeply, and I can contribute with my external experience. Together we can make this department grow." Jessica, one of the analysts, spoke up. "Mrs. Diane, it's nothing personal, but we really don't understand how you got this position. There was no selection process. It wasn't announced internally. This creates insecurity for all of us. I completely understand your concern. I can say I was hired after rigorous interviews and evaluations. The fact that it wasn't a public process doesn't mean it was less thorough. But who conducted those interviews? Insisted Brian. Diane knew she was treading on dangerous ground. If she revealed she was hired directly by the CEO, it could generate even more suspicions about possible favoritism. The interviews were conducted by upper management. I can't go into specific details, but I can guarantee everything was done according to company policies. Upper management means the CEO? Asked Kevin, another analyst. It means people with authority to make hiring decisions, Diane replied diplomatically. The meeting ended without major resolutions. It was evident the team remained suspicious, but at least the issues had been openly put on the table. In the following weeks, Diane dedicated herself intensely to work. She arrived earlier, left later, and studied all company processes. Gradually, her competence began to be recognized through the results she delivered. She identified problems in the corporate client service system that were causing unnecessary delays. She proposed changes that reduced response time by 40% and increased client satisfaction. She also discovered the company was losing important contracts due to communication failures between different departments. She created a communication protocol that significantly improved internal coordination. The positive results began to speak for themselves. Even Brian admitted privately that some of Diane's initiatives had been very effective. 3 months after her hiring, Richard called her for a new evaluation meeting. "Mrs. Diane, I'm impressed with the results you've been delivering. Corporate customer satisfaction rates have improved considerably." "Thank you, Mr. Richard. I'm very pleased with the work we're doing. Actually, I'd like to propose expanding your responsibilities. How about taking on the coordination of the new business department as well?" Diane was surprised by the proposal. It would be a significant promotion just 3 months after being hired. "It would be an honor, Mr. Richard, but do you think it won't create more resistance among the employees?" "Leave that to me. Your results completely justify this promotion, and anyone who has a problem with it will have to deal with me directly." That evening, Diane came home with a feeling of victory she hadn't felt in a long time. She was finally being recognized for her work and competence, not judged for her age. She lived in a simple 2-bedroom apartment in Flatbush, which she shared with her 28-year-old daughter Jennifer, who had been unemployed for a year. The relationship between the two was tense, because Jennifer resented the fact that Diane had gotten a better job than her, even though she was older. "Mum, how was work today?" asked Jennifer when Diane arrived. "Very well, dear. Actually, I received a promotion today." "A promotion, but you've only been there 3 months. It's true, but I've been able to deliver good results." Jennifer shook her head with an air of disbelief. "Mom, that's not normal. Nobody gets promoted that quickly. Are you sure there isn't something strange going on at that company?" "What do you mean by strange?" "I don't know, Mom. You got the job in a very strange way. You were hired without a selection process and now you're being promoted quickly. That doesn't seem normal." Diane was upset by her daughter's insinuations. "Jennifer, I'm being recognized for my work. Why is it so hard to accept that I can be competent?" "It's not that, Mom. It's just that you're 52. The job market doesn't usually value people your age. There has to be something behind this." "What kind of thing?" "I don't know, Mom. Maybe that CEO has some interest in you. Or maybe you have some compromising information about the company. These things happen." Diane was outraged by her daughter's suggestions. "Jennifer, how can you think such a thing? I'm working honestly and being recognized for my results." "Mom, I'm sorry, but I've been unemployed for a year. I have a college degree, I speak English, I know computers. And you, who were unemployed for 6 months, get a job at a huge company and are even promoted quickly. Don't you think that's strange?" The conversation ended in an argument, with Jennifer leaving the house and Diane staying alone with her thoughts. Her daughter's words had planted a seed of doubt in her mind. Was there really something strange about her hiring? The next morning, Diane arrived at work determined not to let the doubts interfere with her performance. She had earned that position through hard work and wasn't going to let insecurities bring her down. During the morning meeting with her expanded team, she presented the plans to integrate the 2 departments under her coordination. The proposals were well structured, and demonstrated her deep knowledge of the company's processes. "Mrs. Diane," said Brian, "I have to admit, your ideas are very good. I think the integration of the departments can really improve our results." "Thank you, Brian. I value your opinion very much." Jessica also spoke up. "Mrs. Diane, I'd like to apologize for how I received you when you arrived. I know I was a bit cold with you." "You don't need to apologize, Jessica. I understand that changes cause insecurity. It's just, well, to be honest, I thought you had gotten the position through connections. But seeing your work over the past few months, I realize I was mistaken. I'm glad we can work together now without that kind of concern." The meeting ended with a much more positive atmosphere than Diane was used to having with her team. She finally felt she was being accepted by the group. That afternoon, she was reviewing reports when her secretary announced she had a visitor. "Who is it?" "A young lady who says she's your daughter." Diane was surprised. Jennifer had never shown up at her workplace. "Send her in." Jennifer entered the room with a serious and somewhat nervous expression. "Hi, Mom. Sorry to show up here at your work." "It's no problem, dear. What happened?" "Mum, I came here to apologize for our conversation yesterday. I said things I shouldn't have said." "I'm glad you recognize that. Actually, I think I was jealous. Seeing you land such a good job while I'm still unemployed got to me." Diane stood up and hugged her daughter. "Jennifer, your time will come too. You're smart and capable. The job market is tough for everyone. I know, Mom, but it's frustrating to be stuck while you're thriving. How about we talk to the HR people here at the company? Maybe they have a position that fits your profile." "You would do that for me?" "Of course, we're family." Diane took Jennifer to see the building and introduced her to some colleagues. When they reached the HR department, Margaret Wilson greeted them with her usual formal manner. "Dr. Margaret, this is my daughter Jennifer. She's looking for a job and would like to know if we have any openings that might interest her." Margaret looked Jennifer up and down with an evaluative gaze. "What's your background?" she asked coldly. "I have a degree in business administration and experience in financial analysis." At the moment, we don't have any open positions for that profile. But I can keep your resume on file if something comes up." Diane realized Margaret was being deliberately discouraging, probably out of personal dislike. "Are you sure, Dr. Margaret? I know the company is growing and always needs good professionals." "I'm sure, Diane. When we have suitable openings, we'll be in touch." Leaving HR, Jennifer commented, "Mom, that woman didn't like me at all. Unfortunately, Dr. Margaret isn't very receptive to new employees. But don't give up. I'll talk to other people in the company." That afternoon, Diane sought out Richard to talk about her daughter's situation. "Mr. Richard, may I speak with you about a personal matter?" "Of course, Mrs. Diane." "What is it about?" "My daughter has been unemployed for a year, and I was wondering if we might have any opportunities for her here at the company." "What's her background?" "Business administration with experience in financial analysis." "Interesting. Actually, we need someone for the controllership department. How about she comes in for an interview?" "That would be wonderful, Mr. Richard. She's very capable and dedicated." "Great. Have her come here tomorrow morning and I'll interview her myself." Diane was thrilled with the opportunity. She could finally help her daughter get a job, and at the same time they could work at the same company. When she got home, she told Jennifer the news, who was ecstatic. "Mom, you got me an interview with the CEO himself." "How?" "I talked to him about your situation, and he showed interest in meeting you. But that's incredible. I can hardly believe it. Jennifer, I want you to be prepared. This is an important opportunity, and you need to make a good impression. Don't worry, Mom. I'll study the company all night." The next morning, Jennifer dressed carefully and accompanied Diane to Richard's office. She was visibly nervous, but also determined. "Mr. Richard, this is my daughter Jennifer." "Pleasure, Jennifer. Your mother has spoken very highly of you. Shall we talk in my office?" During the interview, Jennifer demonstrated solid technical knowledge and good communication skills. Richard was impressed with her qualifications. "Jennifer, I'll be direct. We have an opening in the controllers department that seems to perfectly match your profile. The starting salary would be $5,000. Are you interested? I'm very interested, Mr. Richard. When can I start? Next Monday, but first I need you to go through the formal process with HR. When they left Richard's office, Diane and Jennifer were beaming. Finally, both would be employed and could rebuild their financial lives. However, when they reached HR, Margaret Wilson greeted them with an expression even more serious than usual. "So the young lady is going to work with us?" she asked Jennifer with an ironic tone. "Yes, ma'am. Mr. Richard offered me a position in the controller's department." What an interesting coincidence. Mother and daughter working at the same company, both hired by the CEO personally. That is quite unusual. Diane noticed the insinuating tone in Margaret's voice. "Dr. Margaret, is there a problem with that?" "No problem, Diane. I just observed that certain situations can generate unnecessary comments among the employees." "What kind of comments?" "Well, you know how people talk. Favoritism, nepotism, those things. Especially when the hirings bypass the company's normal processes." Jennifer felt uncomfortable with the conversation. "Ma'am, I can assure you my mother had no influence whatsoever on my hiring. Mr. Richard evaluated me on my merits." "Of course, dear, that's what they all say." Diane was getting irritated with Margaret's insinuations. "Dr. Margaret, if there's something you want to say it directly." "I have nothing to say, Diane. I'm just making observations based on years of experience in human resources." The conversation ended with a tense atmosphere, but Jennifer was formally hired and received all the information about her first day of work. The following Monday, Jennifer started working on the 12th floor in the controller's department. Diane felt proud seeing her daughter entering the same building where she worked. During lunch, they met in the cafeteria and talked about Jennifer's first impressions. "How was the morning?" asked Diane. "Very good, Mum. The people in the department welcomed me well and the work is exactly what I like to do." "I'm very happy for you." "Mum, can I ask a question?" "Of course." "How did you meet Mr. Richard? Why did he hire you in such a different way?" Diane hesitated before answering. She hadn't yet told the whole truth about how she met Richard. "It was a rather casual situation, dear. We met in a situation where he noticed I was looking for a job and became interested in my profile." "But where did you meet?" "On the street, near a building where I had an interview." "And he just offered you a job like that on the street?" "It wasn't quite like that. We talked first, then he called me in for interviews here at the company." Jennifer had a thoughtful expression. "Mom, that's very strange. Businessmen at his level don't usually offer jobs to people they meet on the street." "Why does everyone find it strange? Why is it so hard to accept that he might have recognized my competence?" "It's not that, Mom. It's just that it really is a very unusual situation." Diane began to feel bothered by the constant questions about her hiring. It seemed like no one could simply accept that she had been hired on merit. That afternoon, while working in her office, Diane received a call from Richard. "Mrs. Diane, could you come to my office? I need to speak with you about something important." "Of course, Mr. Richard. I'll come up right now." When she arrived at Richard's office, she noticed he had a worried expression. "Please sit down, Mrs. Diane. Unfortunately, I need to discuss something delicate." "What happened?" "I've been receiving some comments about your hiring and your daughters that concern me." Diane felt her stomach tighten. "What kind of comments?" "Some people are suggesting there's something inappropriate about our hiring decisions. They're questioning the criteria used and implying there might be favoritism." "Mr. Richard, you know that's not true." "I know, Mrs. Diane, but unfortunately perceptions sometimes matter more than reality in the corporate environment." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that perhaps it would be better if I kept some distance from both of you for a while. I need the results to speak for themselves, without any suspicion of favoritism." Diane was disappointed but understood Richard's position. "I understand, Mr. Richard. We'll do our work as well as possible, so there's no doubt about our competence. I'm sure you will, and I want you to know I trust both of you completely." In the following days, Diane noticed Richard was indeed keeping his distance. He no longer greeted her personally when they met in the hallways, and their communications were now only through third parties. The situation became even more complicated when Diane discovered some employees were spreading rumors about her and Richard. Comments about how she'd been hired began spreading through the company. One afternoon, while in the break room, Diane heard two employees from the finance department talking. "Did you see how that Diane got a job here? How was it? They say she seduced the CEO. She fixed herself up in front of his car and then made up a story to get attention." "Really? And now she brought her daughter too?" "That's right. Mother and daughter both working here, both hired by the boss. Very suspicious." Diane was devastated hearing those comments. She knew the rumors were completely false, but she also knew how they could damage her reputation in the company. When she got home that night, she told Jennifer about the rumors circulating. "Mom, this is terrible. What are we going to do?" "I don't know, dear. The only thing we can do is keep working well and hope the truth prevails." "But who's spreading these rumors?" "I'm not sure, but I suspect it's Dr. Margaret. She never supported me from day one. Do you think we should approach Mr. Richard to clarify the situation?" "No, Jennifer. He already said he needs to keep his distance. If we approach him now, it will only make the rumors worse." The two fell silent, thinking about how to resolve this difficult situation. The following week, the situation worsened even further. Diane was called to a meeting with the entire company board to present her department's results. It was an important opportunity to showcase her work, but also a moment of great exposure. During the presentation, Diane demonstrated that corporate client satisfaction rates had improved significantly since she took over as coordinator. The results were impressive and undeniable. "Congratulations, Coordinator Diane," said the commercial director. "These results are excellent." "Thank you. I have a very competent team that has helped me implement the improvements." Margaret Wilson, who was also attending the meeting, made an observation. "It's true the results are good, but it would be interesting to better understand the methods used to achieve them." "What kind of methods, Dr. Margaret?" asked Diane. "Well, sometimes exceptional results might indicate that not all procedures are being properly followed." The implication was clear. Margaret was suggesting that Diane might be doing something improper to achieve those results. Richard, who was chairing the meeting, intervened. "Dr. Wilson, all processes in Coordinator Diane's department are regularly audited. There are no irregularities." "Of course, Mr. Thompson. I just thought it was important to clarify." The meeting ended with praise for Diane's results, but she left with the feeling that Margaret was deliberately trying to undermine her. That afternoon, Brian sought out Diane in her office. "Mrs. Miller, may I speak with you privately?" "Of course, Brian. Close the door and have a seat." "Mrs. Miller, I need to tell you something that might be important for you." "What is it about?" "I've been hearing some comments about you and your daughter at the company, comments that aren't true." "What kind of comments?" "About how you got your jobs here. Some people are spreading false stories." "Do you know who's spreading these rumors?" "I have a suspicion, but I'm not sure. I could be wrong." "Tell me your suspicion, Brian." "I think it might be Dr. Wilson. She has been making indirect comments about both of you on several occasions." Diane sighed. Her suspicions were being confirmed. "Brian, why are you telling me this?" "Because I've worked with you for a few months, and I know you're competent and honest. These rumors are unfair and could harm both you and the company. Thank you for warning me, Brian. But what can I do about it?" "I don't know, Mrs. Miller. Maybe talk to Mr. Thompson." "He already told me he needs to keep his distance because of the comments. If I go to him now, it might look like I'm trying to take advantage of the situation." Brian shook his head, showing he understood Diane's dilemma. It really is a very difficult situation. That night, Diane was at home reflecting on everything that had happened when she received a call from an unknown number. "Hello? Good evening. Is this Diane Miller?" "Yes, this is she. Who's speaking?" "My name is Michael Johnson. I'm a journalist with Business Insider. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your hiring at Thompson Enterprise Group." Diane froze. How had a journalist gotten her number, and why was he interested in her hiring? "I'm sorry, but I'm not interested in speaking with the press." "Mrs. Miller, I've received information that your hiring may have occurred irregularly. I'd like to hear your side of the story." "My hiring was completely regular. I have nothing more to say." "Do you confirm that you were hired personally by CEO Richard Thompson without going through a selection process?" "I will not make any further comments. Excuse me." Diane hung up the phone but was very worried. If the press was investigating her hiring, the situation could get much worse. She immediately called Jennifer to tell her about the journalist's call. "Mom, this is very serious. If a story comes out in the papers, it could harm both you and Mr. Thompson." "I know, dear. I'm very worried." "Do you think you should tell Mr. Thompson about this call?" "I think so. He needs to know that the press is investigating." The next morning, Diane sought out Richard in his office. "Mr. Thompson, I need to speak with you urgently about something very important." "What happened, Mrs. Miller?" "Last night I received a call from a journalist asking questions about my hiring. He said he received information that there may have been irregularities." Richard looked visibly concerned. "What kind of questions did he ask?" "He asked if I confirmed that I was hired by you personally, without a selection process." "And what did you answer?" "I said that my hiring was regular and that I wouldn't make any comments." Richard fell silent for a few moments, clearly thinking about the implications of the situation. "Mrs. Diane, unfortunately, I think the time has come for us to make a difficult decision." "What kind of decision?" "Perhaps it would be best for you and your daughter to step away from the company for a while, until this situation clears up." Diane felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. "Mr. Richard, are you firing me?" "It's not a firing, Mrs. Diane. It's a temporary leave, with full pay, obviously." "But why? We haven't done anything wrong." "I know you haven't, but if a negative article comes out in the press, it could hurt both you and the company. It's better to be safe." Diane fell silent, processing what was happening. After months of hard work and good results, she was being put on leave because of malicious rumors. How long would this leave be? Until the situation is completely cleared up. It could be a few weeks or a few months. And if the situation doesn't clear up, if the rumors continue? Richard sighed deeply. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that." Diane left Richard's office devastated. She would have to tell Jennifer that both of them would have to step away from the company for an indefinite period. When she met her daughter for lunch, she told her about the conversation with Richard. "Mom, this is so unfair. We didn't do anything wrong." "I know, honey, but unfortunately justice doesn't always prevail in the corporate world." "So now what? What are we going to do?" "We'll go home and wait for the situation to resolve itself." "Do you think it will resolve itself?" "I don't know, Jennifer. Honestly, I don't know anything anymore." The two of them left the company that afternoon with a feeling of defeat. Months of hard work and dedication had been destroyed by malicious rumors and gossip. In the following days, Diane stayed at home trying to understand how everything had come to this point. She had been hired legitimately, had worked with dedication, and had delivered excellent results. Even so, she was being punished because of unfounded insinuations. A week after the leave began, she received another call from the journalist Michael Johnson. "Mrs. Diane, I heard that you were put on leave from the company. Does this confirm the suspicions of irregularities in your hiring?" "It confirms nothing. My leave is temporary and was a preventive decision by the company." "Preventive against what?" "Against malicious speculation like the kind you're making." "Mrs. Diane, I have information from a reliable source that your hiring was the result of personal favoritism from CEO Richard Thompson. That information is false. Do you deny that you were hired after a chance meeting on the street?" Diane realized that the journalist knew specific details about how she met Richard. Someone had given him precise information. "Who gave you this information?" "I can't reveal my sources, ma'am." "Well, I can tell you that your sources are lying. My hiring was completely legitimate." "Then why were you put on leave?" "Precisely to avoid this kind of unfounded speculation." Diane hung up the phone again, but she was even more worried. It was obvious that someone inside the company was providing detailed information to the journalist. She called Richard to tell him about the new call. "Mr. Richard, that journalist called again. He knows specific details about how we met. Someone inside the company is giving him information. Do you have any suspicions about who it might be?" "I do, but I prefer not to make accusations without proof." "I understand. Mrs. Diane, unfortunately, I have some bad news. The company's legal department advised that both of you should definitely be let go." Diane felt her world collapse. Definitely let go, but why? To protect the company's reputation. If a negative story comes out in the press, it could affect our business. Mr. Richard, this is a tremendous injustice. I know, Mrs. Diane. Believe me, this is one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make. And our severance? You'll receive everything you're entitled to, plus an extra compensation that I'll pay personally. Extra compensation doesn't make up for the humiliation we're going through. Richard fell silent on the other end of the line. Mrs. Diane, I understand your outrage. If it were up to me alone, you would still be working here. But a company this size has many interests involved. I understand, Mr. Richard. Thank you for everything you've done for us. When Diane hung up the phone, she began to cry. Everything she had fought for in recent months was lost. She and Jennifer were unemployed again, and on top of that, their reputation was tarnished by malicious rumors. Jennifer came home at that moment and found her mother crying. Mom, what happened? We were fired, sweetheart. Definitely. Fired? But we didn't do anything wrong. It doesn't matter, Jennifer. The company needs to protect its reputation. This is an absurd injustice. Let's sue them. With what money, dear? And sue on what grounds? They can fire whoever they want. Jennifer sat beside her mother and hugged her. Mom, we'll get through this. We're strong and capable. We'll find other jobs. It won't be easy, Jennifer. After all this, our reputation in the market might be compromised. Then let's go to another market, Mom, to another city, if necessary. Diane looked at her daughter and felt a glimmer of hope. At least they were together in this fight. 3 days later, the story came out in Business Insider. The headline was, CEO of large company accused of favoritism in hiring. The article told the whole story, from Diane and Richard's meeting on the street to the hiring of mother and daughter. Although the journalist made no direct accusations, the implications were clear. Richard was forced to give interviews to defend himself, explaining that the hires were based on technical competence, but the damage was already done. Diane and Jennifer became known in the New York City business world as the women who got jobs through other means. Finding new jobs became practically impossible. 2 months after the dismissal, they were facing serious financial difficulties. The severance had helped for a while, but it didn't last forever. It was then that Diane received an unexpected call from Richard. Mrs. Diane, how are you? Surviving, Mr. Richard. And you? Well, thank you. Mrs. Diane, I'm calling because I found out who leaked the information to the press. Who was it? Dr. Margaret Wilson. We found emails of her communicating with the journalist. Diane wasn't surprised. She had always suspected Margaret was behind the rumors. And what will happen to her? She's already been fired for cause. And there's more. We discovered she was involved in other irregularities at the company. What kind of irregularities? She was taking bribes from recruitment firms to steer hires. Ironically, she was doing exactly what she accused you of. Diane shook her head. It was incredible how people projected their own flaws onto others. Mr. Richard, does this change anything for us? Actually, yes. I'd like to invite you both to return to the company, with promotions and a salary increase as compensation for what you went through. That's a tempting offer, Mr. Richard, but I need to think. Of course, take all the time you need. After hanging up, Diane spoke with Jennifer about Richard's proposal. Mom, are you going to accept? I don't know, dear. On one hand, it would be good to go back to work. On the other, I don't know if I could feel comfortable there after everything that happened. I understand, Mom. It doesn't matter to me. The important thing is that we're together. Diane spent several days thinking about the proposal. Finally, she made her decision and called Richard. Mr. Thompson, I've thought a lot about your proposal. And what is your decision? I'll accept, but with a few conditions. What conditions? I want an official letter from the company acknowledging that our dismissal was unfair and based on false information, and I want that letter to be published in the same outlets that ran the original story. That can be arranged, and I want to work on a specific project, creating a program to combat age discrimination in hiring. Excellent idea. I accept all your conditions. Then I accept coming back to the company. 1 month later, Diane and Jennifer were back at Thompson Enterprise Group. The company's retraction letter was published, definitively clearing their names. Diane took over the coordination of a new project to combat age discrimination in the job market. She used her own experience to create policies and programs that would help other people in the same situation. The project became a success story and was adopted by other companies. Diane became a reference on the subject, being invited to give talks and speak at conferences. 6 months later, she was on stage at a major business event telling her story. "When I saw myself fixing my hair in a car window on the street, I never imagined that moment would completely change my life," she said to an audience of over 1,000 people. "I went through humiliation, prejudice, and injustices, but I learned that our age does not determine our ability. Our experience is an asset, not a flaw." The audience applauded enthusiastically. "Today at 53, I'm the coordinator of a project that has already helped hundreds of people over 45 find new professional opportunities. And most importantly, I learned that sometimes the greatest injustices lead us to the biggest opportunities for growth." Richard, who was in the audience, was moved hearing Diane's speech. He remembered the day he saw her fixing her hair in his car window and realized how that chance encounter had turned into something much bigger. Jennifer was also in the audience, proud of her mother and grateful for everything they had been through together. She was now a supervisor in her department and had learned a lot about resilience by watching her mother's journey. After the talk, several people approached Diane to thank her and share their own stories of overcoming. A lady about 60 years old approached with tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Miller, your story inspired me so much. I've been unemployed for 2 years and was losing hope. Now I know it's possible to start over." "Of course it's possible," Diane replied. "Age brings us wisdom, and wisdom is always valued by those who have the intelligence to recognize it." That night, Diane returned home with a feeling of accomplishment she hadn't felt in a long time. Her journey had been difficult and painful, but it had also been transformative. She looked in the mirror and saw a woman different from the one who had fixed her hair in a car window months before. She saw a stronger, more confident woman with a clear purpose in life. Richard also arrived home that night with mixed feelings. On one hand, he was proud of how the situation had been resolved. On the other, he felt guilty for not protecting Diane and Jennifer from the beginning of the troubles. He thought of his mother, Mrs. Elizabeth, and how proud she would be to know he had helped other working women overcome difficulties similar to those she had faced. The following week, Diane received an unexpected proposal. A major consulting firm wanted to hire her to lead a nationwide diversity and inclusion program. The salary offered was 3 times what she earned at Thompson Enterprise Group. It was an incredible opportunity for professional growth. She scheduled a meeting with Richard to discuss the proposal. "Mr. Richard, I've received a job offer I'd like to discuss with you." "Of course, Mrs. Diane. What is it about?" "A consulting firm wants me to lead a national diversity and inclusion program. It's a unique opportunity to expand the impact of the work we're doing here." Richard was silent for a few moments. He knew it would be difficult to replace Diane, but he also recognized that this was a unique opportunity for her. "It's a great opportunity, Mrs. Diane, although I will miss you very much here. Mr. Richard, this company gave me a chance to start over when I needed it most. I will be eternally grateful for that. But I think the time has come to aim higher." "I understand perfectly. When would you like to leave?" "I need 2 months to finalize the ongoing projects and train my replacement." "Perfect. And Mrs. Diane, I want you to know it was a privilege to work with you." "The privilege was mine, Mr. Richard." 2 months later, Diane was saying goodbye to Thompson Enterprise Group. The entire team gathered for a farewell party in her honor. Brian, who had become a great ally over the months, gave an emotional speech. "Mrs. Diane, when you arrived here, I admit I had prejudices. I thought someone your age wouldn't be able to keep up with our work pace. How wrong I was. You not only kept up, but taught us a lot about dedication, competence, and resilience. Thank you for making me a better person and a more aware professional." The entire team applauded. Diane was moved to see how she had managed to earn the respect of people who initially doubted her. Richard also gave a speech. "Mrs. "Diane, a few months ago I saw you fixing yourself up in my car window. At that moment, I had no idea that encounter would change not only your life, but also mine and many others. You taught me that sometimes the best opportunities arise in the most unlikely moments, and that recognizing talent is independent of age, appearance, or circumstances. I wish you great success in your new journey." Jennifer also got emotional during the party. She had decided to stay at Thompson Enterprise Group, where she felt valued and had good growth prospects. At the end of the party, mother and daughter hugged. "Mom, I'm so proud of you," said Jennifer. "And I'm proud of you, dear. Thank you for supporting me through all the difficult times. We'll always be together no matter what happens." The following Monday, Diane started her new job. Her first mission would be to travel across the country, implementing diversity and inclusion programs in major companies. It was exactly the kind of work she had always dreamed of doing, using her personal experience to help others overcome barriers and prejudices. 6 months later, the program led by Diane had already impacted more than 50 companies and helped hundreds of mature professionals find new opportunities. She became a nationally recognized speaker and wrote a book about her experience, which became a bestseller. The title of the book was The Reflection of Resilience: How an Unlikely Mirror Changed My Life. Richard continued to lead Thompson Enterprise Group, but now with a different vision about diversity and inclusion. The company became a benchmark in the market for its innovative hiring policies. He never forgot the lesson Diane had taught him, that sometimes the most valuable people are in the most unlikely places. Jennifer prospered in her career and became one of the youngest executives in the company. She always said she learned everything about leadership and resilience by watching her mother. 2 years after the chance encounter at the car window, Diane was again in New York City for a lecture. After the event, she decided to stop by the place where it had all begun. There was the same building, the same street, the same spot where she had fixed her appearance on that day that changed her life. She smiled as she remembered how she felt at that moment, desperate, humiliated, and hopeless. Now at 54, she was a respected executive, best-selling author, and a national reference in diversity and inclusion. As she looked at the spot, a luxury car stopped in the same parking space where Richard had parked 2 years earlier. A middle-aged woman approached the vehicle's window and began to get ready for an interview. Diane watched the scene with a smile on her face. She approached the woman gently. "Excuse me, do you have an interview today?" "Yes, I do," the woman replied nervously. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious. May I wish you good luck?" "Of course, thank you. I really need this interview to work out." "I'm sure it will. And remember, our experience is our greatest strength." The woman smiled and thanked her. Diane watched her walk away toward the office building, walking with the same determination she had shown 2 years before. At that moment, Diane understood that her story had come full circle. She had turned a moment of vulnerability into a source of strength for herself and for many others. The reflection in the car window hadn't just shown her appearance that day. It had reflected her true essence. A strong, competent woman capable of overcoming any obstacle. As she walked down the street, Diane thought about everything she had experienced over the past 2 years. The humiliations, the prejudices, the injustices, but also the victories, the recognition and the personal fulfillment. She had proven that age is just a number when you have competence, determination, and the courage to never give up. Richard, who was in his office on the 20th floor, looked out the window and saw a woman walking down the street with confident steps. For a moment, he wondered if it could be Diane. He smiled as he thought about how that chance encounter had changed his perspective on so many things. He had learned to value experience more, to question prejudices, and to give opportunities to people the market had unfairly discarded. Thompson Enterprise Group now had the lowest turnover rate in the market and the highest levels of employee satisfaction. That was because Richard had understood that diversity wasn't just politically correct, but also economically smart. Jennifer, who now managed a team of 15 people, always told her mother's story to inspire other employees. She had become a respected leader and an example that circumstances do not determine destiny. That evening, Diane called Jennifer to tell her about her visit to the place where it all began. Mom, it must have been emotional to go back there. It really was, dear. It made me realize how much we've grown in these 2 years. Mom, can I ask a question I've always been curious about? Of course. On the day you fixed your appearance in Mr. Richards' car window, didn't you think it was strange for him to offer you a job so quickly? Diane laughed. Actually, yes, Jennifer. I thought it was very strange. But I was so desperate that I decided to accept the opportunity, even without fully understanding his motivations. And now, do you understand his motivations? I think so. He saw in me something that reminded him of his own mother, and he wanted to give me the opportunity that perhaps he couldn't give to her. That's a beautiful story, Mom. Yes, it is, dear. And the most beautiful part is that it hasn't ended. We continue writing new chapters every day. 3 years after the initial encounter, Diane was invited to speak at an international conference on diversity and inclusion. It was the ultimate recognition of her work. In her speech, she told her entire story, from the moment of vulnerability in the car window to becoming a global reference in the fight against age discrimination. When I was 52 years old and had been unemployed for 6 months, I used car windows as mirrors because I didn't even have money to buy a compact mirror. She told an audience of 2,000 executives from around the world. Today, at 55 years old, I'm here speaking to you about the importance of valuing experience and combating prejudice. My story proves that it's never too late to start over. That age brings wisdom, not obsolescence, and that sometimes our greatest failures are just preparation for our greatest successes. The audience rose in a 5-minute standing ovation. Tears streamed down the faces of many people who identified with her story. After the talk, dozens of people approached to share their own stories of resilience. Diane realized her story had touched hearts on every continent. Richard, who watched the talk online, was moved to see how the woman he had found fixing her makeup in his car window had become a global inspiration. He thought about how seemingly small decisions can have enormous impacts. His choice to offer an opportunity to Diane had changed not only her life, but also the lives of thousands of others who benefited from the work she developed. That evening, Diane dined alone at an elegant restaurant in Chicago, where the conference had taken place. She looked at her reflection in the restaurant window and smiled. The reflection showed a confident, accomplished woman at peace with herself. It was completely different from the reflection she had seen in the car window 3 years earlier. She raised a glass of wine to toast herself. "To the reflection of resilience," she said quietly, and she knew that no matter what new challenges life brought, she was prepared to face them with the strength she had discovered within herself. End of story. What did you think of Diane's transformation? Could you relate to the challenges she faced? Tell us in the comments which part of the story moved you the most, and if you've ever been through similar situations. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories of resilience.